All right, this is working with single directory components and UI patterns. This ostensibly is a class for site builders and developers. Developers will probably appreciate the first half more, which covers single directory components specifically, and then site builders will appreciate the second half, which has a lot more to do with site building. Not there yet. My name is Dan Hansen. I'm the lead developer at Savant Group. We're the sponsors of the con here today. Drupal developer for 15 years, since at least Drupal 6. I learned that trial by fire, so I was hardly an expert at that point, but I've gotten better and better as time has gone on. I also work with and enjoy WordPress, data modeling, some weird CSS and JS stuff, and just a little trivia. I've got a whole room dedicated to Lego, and yet I've only managed to build like 2 sets this year. I'm hoping it's because I've been busy and not lazy. If you're looking for me after this, like I said, I got to jet out of here immediately afterwards, so I'm Dan Hansen, or D Hansen on Drupal.org and Drupal Slack. I'm pretty responsive on Slack. Part 1, single directory components. You'll see links at the bottom of these pages. The PDF for these slides has been uploaded. All the links are active there. And usually the links will correspond to documentation on these specific things, so feel free to download those and take a look. Concept of a component, what makes a component? It's something on the front end and the back end that is modular, reusable, has a specific function. It's usually able to be nested inside of other components. That's kind of, in my opinion, a key feature. You see on the right side here, this diagram. This is, if you're familiar with some of the older web technologies, diagrams stemming from atomic design strategies, where you would have, these small atomic pieces of design, and they build up into molecules, which were bigger components, and organisms, which were bigger than that. That was always sort of a design style and a design library sort of thing that I didn't really have access to as a developer. I feel like components, in this case, are sort of the developer access to that style of atomic design of building up components like that. Examples, menus. You've got these individual components that are called links. It probably wouldn't actually be a component, but you could make them. And then you build them out into bigger components like menu structures, link lists, drop-down or mega menus, that sort of thing. Forms, generally forms themselves, not really thought of as components. It could be. Everything that's kind of a wrapper could be a component, but the fields themselves always considered components. You've got the label associated with the specific type of field that you're using, and just a lot of meta information that could come along with that. Slider is another good example. The slider itself is a component, but then each individual slide could be considered a component. And then my favorite is always cards. Cards are nice because they have generally like an image and a title and a link and a call to action, and it's all really self-contained, so it makes for a great example. The single directory part. So the idea is you take your baseline HTML, or in this case on Drupal, the twig template. You add in some other files to flesh out the component, the CSS, the JavaScript, resources like images or libraries, shove all of that into a single directory. That's the name, single directory component. And then on top of that, required alongside the twig template is a YAML definition. We'll go through a little bit of that in just a minute here. Then you put them in a specific module or theme directory. Slash components in any module or theme that you're constructing. So just look for that directory and you'll find folders of single directory components on existing themes more than likely, and modules moving forward. And now you can build a component library for use in your site. Defining an SDC, information laid out in component name.yaml. Basically all the files within your single directory component will be component name.yaml, just whatever you will feel like titling it as the machine name. At its most basic, it just needs a name and a type in that YAML file. And then the real meat of the construction of a component is the creation of inputs with props and slots. Props are for your tightly structured data. And that slide is messed up. Your tightly structured data, and usually it refers to UI logic, so like your booleans, your being able to do like class names, things like that. I have that written down for slots, that's not correct. That's for props. And then slots are for your unstructured data. Think your nested components, your formatted text, images, usually in my case. Saw a lot on Mike's talk about using images as just props coming in with a whole bunch of associated data. I usually use slots just because it's more generalized. And then just about everything else. So let's take a look at a quick demonstration of a component that I built out for this class. You can see here I've got a basic module card box that I just created for this. Really simple, it's just got an info file and a libraries file, and then this components directory. Within that components directory is two components, business card, which isn't actually fleshed out, and then the party card. The party card has all the things that you would expect from a single directory component, starting with the HTML in the form of the twig. Couple notes here. You'll see that I'm just using generic twig variables to output things. That's a really convenient way to do it, a really convenient way to check things. There's stuff to be said about using slots over props for that specific reason, so that you could do that sort of implementation. In a lot of the documentation that's out there right now, you'll also see people using block tags to sort of inject content into slots. Don't recommend that. And we'll hopefully talk a little bit more about that later. Another thing to take note of, up at the top here, we do get by default an attributes variable coming in from outside. Single directory components, and specifically UI patterns using single directory components, makes use of that pretty well. It actually gives you just an entry box on literally every opportunity you have to modify a component, and you can just fill out whatever attributes you want. So whenever you want to add or put a class on your big wrapper, you'll want to just add it either through this variable, or you could just put it in line here where this class variable is. So that's a twig. We've got the CSS, we've got the JS, everything that sort of calls back to these components. And then we've got the YAML file. The YAML file here, you can see we've got our name. We've got this variance section, which is something that's new. It actually shows up as a prop on the back end of the form later on when we look at the forms for these. Variance can be pretty much used to implement different styles. I like to think of the BEM CSS model, where you can have like just a hyphen modifier, if you're at all familiar with any of that. But then you have the actual props down here. This says props, and then it goes into a type, and then it goes into properties beneath that, and this is where the actual props live. That's a weird nomenclature thing that I don't know why that happened on single directory components, but the actual props themselves are under properties and not props specifically. But in this case, I've got one prop. It's emoji. It is a dancing emoji. You'll see it. It's a string, and it's actually an enumerated string. It's got 3 possible values. That enumeration can speak later to the different types of fields that UI patterns will be able to render for a field. And then it goes even further down here to do a meta enumeration where I can provide labels for each of those strings. And then beneath that, you see I've got these slots. These slots are very much not as strictly defined. It's just got a title. Doesn't need the description, but it has one just in case somebody wants to know what's going on. And then down here, I've got a library overrides. This actually implements a JS confetti library that I'll demonstrate here in a bit. There's a lot of other keys that are available for use in this YAML setup. A lot more things you could possibly do, but these are kind of the core things, the props of the slots, and the name. That's about the long and short of what you absolutely need. Just real quick, I do have a demo site for this. It's on the Umami demo. I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with that. That's kind of checked out Drupal before. But what I can do is actually look at our UI libraries using a module I'll discuss later. We've actually got a list of the available components, and you can see that even the Umami theme has these components available for us. But this is the party card. Yay, party card! It's also got a variant, party in the dark. And if you press the button on either one, you get confetti. Yay, confetti! All right. So using single directory components. Single directory components are part of core as of 10.1. It was a secondary module that you needed to enable until 10.3. I don't remember if it was experimental or not, but it doesn't matter anymore because you don't need to turn it on. It's just part of the theming layer for the whole site. You can build or obtain components. The idea of components, of course, being that they are kind of modular, and because it's all in one directory, it can travel to different themes. And then just shove them all in the correct directory, that /components directory in a theme or module, and it'll show up in your library for use. When you go to embed your component, you can either render it with a PHP array or include it in a Twig template file. This is what it looks like in the examples that are online for PHP rendering as an array. Should be familiar for anybody that's worked with theming in Drupal 7 and beyond. This type of array, just you give it the component name up here, and then you fill out the props in the slots as required. You can also embed it in Twig. This is an example of using the embed setup. This is the one you'll find in the docs, and the one that kind of gives a lot of credence to this block setup, where you inject blocks into the slots to make them work. In my opinion, and in the opinion of Pierre, who runs UI Suite, not the best approach. Instead, it's usually better to do an include, and you just give it the name of the include, and then you can pass log the properties and fields that you need to afterwards. This documentation link down here sort of goes to a issue in the queue for Drupal core, where Pierre actually lays out his sort of stance on all that. Recommend to take a read if you're interested in actually trying to inject anything into a template. That's all fine, but couldn't this be easier, a wink? For certain definitions of easy, introducing UI Suite. So what's UI Suite? UI Suite is a working group essentially, of an ecosystem of modules and themes that connects all design system artifacts with Drupal UI. The goal is to develop and implement a full set of APIs to allow design systems to be worked on by site builders with low or no code. The idea being that the UI Suite team took a look at Drupal and said, you can implement business rules, you can implement logic, you can implement data modeling so easy with Drupal. It's kind of what site builders are really good for in creating. You can't do that with a design system. You can't do that with layouts. Well, you can kind of do it with layouts, but you can't really push all of these things to different parts of the site, all these design elements to different parts of the site the way you ought to be able to. And they wanted to sort of bring the theming layer up to the same level as the business logic or modeling level. There's already modules and themes geared towards reaching that goal. There's themes already available for your favorite design systems. Bootstrap, Material. If you're using Tailwind, you can use Daisy UI. There's also the big federal design system, US, WDS, and a couple others. It's a very active team led by Pierre Dereau. I think that's saying that right. He's very French, and he's very helpful. Monthly team meetings that anyone can join, and he's very active on Slack, Drupal Slack. That hash UI Suite initiative, there's also hash components if you're working on something specific to components. I personally hopped in that component channel thinking I was going to get some feedback over the course of a week, and he was there that same day just like, oh man, let me help you out. So he's great, the whole team's great. Glad to join those meetings when I can. Their team loves graphics. This is a nice little one. Without UI Suite, you can see we've got this business layer and content modeling layer. They're site buildable at the simple and medium levels, but complex, everything's going to be custom code if it's complex. But as for display, it's only partially site buildable. And then you have to write custom code at even medium difficulty here. With UI Suite, we're trying to bring that all up to the same level. So it's all site buildable at the medium level. So, ecosystem modules for UI Suite. All these models are meant to expose things to site builders to allow them to create the site using only the UI. UI styles, define styles from modules and themes. UI skins lets you set CSS variables and themes that can be used globally. UI icons allows the creation of icon packs. I think that specific part of it has moved more to Drupal core, but UI icons still affords a couple different bonus things like having a icons field and letting you pull from those icon libraries specifically. UI examples, we took a look at that kind of earlier. with the list of the cards and components, or the list of the components on that one page. There's just demonstrations of other UI suite modules as a part of that. And then UI patterns, which is something we'll talk about moving forward. This graphic is kind of another breakdown of what UI suite is trying to cover overall. You've got the components, variables, layouts, and grids that pipe into UI patterns. Style utilities and helpers pipe into the UI styles. Themes and modes, CS variables, into UI skins, icon packs, UI icons, so on and so forth. So, let's talk about UI patterns. UI patterns 2, and there is a distinction, I'll talk about it just a little bit, is a connection between single directory components and just about every other tool used to format content in the UI in Drupal. UI patterns predates single directory components. UI patterns 2 uses the Drupal core single directory component API specifically, or directly. When it predated single directory components, it was kind of using its own set of component systems, but that's taking a back seat, and you probably want to move away from that if possible. UI patterns has sub-modules that implements different single directory components in different places. UI patterns blocks for the block system, UI patterns layout for the layout builder, UI patterns field formatters for field formatters, UI patterns views for view styles and view rows. A new one that they just introduced was UI pattern fields for field implementation. That one in particular is kind of interesting, and I think still listed as experimental, but the idea is that once UI patterns kind of gets rolled more tightly into core, that they would want to use single directory components to render fields on the back end. So if you had like a really specific way you needed to set up a select box or something like that, then that would be a specific component that you could engage and render there. I think by extension that would also end up rolling single directory components over into things like web form, where you'd be able to do displays there. And then beyond that, you've got things like UI patterns DS, which is not in the UI patterns core set of modules for display suite, and also UI patterns field group for field groups. You can see here yet another breakdown. They do love these graphics. You've got buttons, cards, card decks, sliders, tabs, all pipes into UI patterns as a component library, and then can be doled out into all these different plugins through the submodules. So blocks, layout, field formatters, and views. And then it works to engage these other display builders. So now let's do a demonstration of UI patterns blocks. We're already familiar with my particular component here, the party card. Well, what if I want that as a block? So I've got UI pattern block already spelled incorrectly. I've got all these models already engaged, so UI patterns blocks, field formatter, layouts, views I think is down here as well. So what we're going to do is go to structure, block layout, and open this back up. And right up here on the content area, we'll place a block. And you don't even need to add a content block or anything like that. Once UI patterns is turned on, it will list those components as blocks in this listing. So I search for party card. It shows up under the category UI patterns as a block. Now you can place it. So I don't want to display a title, but I do want to pick a variant, which is the dark party. I had a rave party. I was working on it. Didn't happen though. And then you've got different slots for things. Here's where it gets a little bit interesting, because the way you can fill these out is multitude, is many. So you've got a box here to select a source. Your source could be a component, like another smaller component. Like if you had a headline component, you could shove that in there. It could be another block. If you had a block that was a specific set of content that you wanted as a sub-block within this block, that's possible as well. You could also do a token if you're used to using tokens across the site or wanted to use a site name or something like that. The one I generally try to use, just in specific instances like this where I only need like a straight line of text, is the WYSIWYG. And it works just like you would expect. You get your text box. You got to select the text format. And then you still have the option to add more content to that region. Because it's a slot, it's super flexible, so you can just keep adding content as you need it. Body content, I could add a body, why not? Could try to edit right. No wonder this took exactly 46 minutes before. I can't spell. All right, so I won't need to add a button text. It's fine. It won't crash the component or anything. Slots are empty. That's okay. Depending on how your twig is set up, it could also be set up to not render anything if there's nothing in that section. So I haven't done that on this particular one, but that's possible. Down here in props, you can see attributes. This is what I was talking about. You can just loosely add attributes, any attributes you want. So if you had like a title or a class or anything that you wanted on that wrapper. But then I have this other one, this dancing emoji. This is the enumerated text field that I had. So you can see that I've got labels for each of the 3 possible values. I'm going to add the confetti ball. And then the rest of the block configuration is just like you'd expect. I want to see this right now, so I'm going to put it... I'm going to add a text format to this because I forgot it. And then I'm going to save this block. And now it'll appear under my main content with any luck. You got to cheer if this works because sometimes demos don't work. There it is, the party card. Woo! The confetti even works. Hooray! So that's cool. We did blocks. How about field formatter? So let's go to structure, content types. I made a content type for this called blog post. Not really necessary, but why not? And go to manage display. This is where you generally, set up your field formatters. You decide how they're going to look. In this particular case, I want my cool names field to actually be using a component. You got 2 options here. You use a component as the wrapper for the field, or you use a component for every item in that field if it's a multi-value field. So let's try the first one. Once you have that selected, you come over here, you select the component. I'm going to do my party card again. A lot of similar configuration you're seeing here. For the body, though, what I want to do in the source is you have additional options because of the context that you're working with. So because it's a field formatter, you can do within this field formatter another field formatter, so that it could be, trim text if you needed to, if it was a long body or something like that. It doesn't want to supersede, get rid of the field formatter entirely. It just wants you to be able to put it in this nice container and component wrapper. Again, you have an option for components. You got options for blocks, WYSIWYG, entity link, which can link out to the entity, field label. I want field value though, so I think if I do entity field, I can select the field that goes in here. This is not quite what I expected, but that's okay. Field label. Is it because it's a reference field? We'll all find out together. Gotta have the dancing emoji here. Update. And save. So let's take a look at our content. And I have a blog post here. And down here you can see that the body content did not update. Yay. Oh, this is the different one. It should be appearing here where the cool names are. That's blocks. I want to manage display. And the issue is going to be in here. It's the field label. I think it's going to be in here. Block, reference to any. Could be one of those things where I didn't save it correctly. So we will try just adding a canonical link to the node and hitting save. Oh, I know what the problem is. Okay. I'm not rendering this particular display view. I'm actually rendering this full content view when I view that page, and that's why. So I'm going to do the same thing in here. Add the component. add the party card, add the body, add the field. A lot of these menus are very nested, and that's kind of one of the detriments of doing things this way, is because you're going to have to do a lot of like components within components within components sometimes, and get a little gross and a little heavy. I don't have a great solution for that. It's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination, but it does work, so that's always nice. Eventually. Okay. Save. Hooray! This is just the label. I want the field values though. I'm not quite sure why they're not showing up as an option here, but I don't want to hang on to this, because what we can do is instead cancel and change it to a per item view. So it's the same sort of view with the party card, but once I get down here, it's interesting that it kept that information. That's okay. But because it's a per item view, it actually comes to the field item and lets you select the text value of that item. So we'll update, save, and refresh. And now every one of my cool names has its own little card. Yay! And they all confetti. So that's cool. You can use it as a field formatter, but not everybody's using field formatters anymore. What about Layout Builder? Let's come here and use Layout Builder instead. The cool thing about this is that you're probably used to having to define all of your sort of architecture for Layout Builder. Each one of these sections kind of has to be written out and explained. Well, if you have a set of components that works, you could just use these components as these section wrappers. So I've got a party card here. And again, we're seeing similar sorts of things. We've got the variant available to us. I can set the bright party, and these props are available. And you're like, well, what about my slots? Well, I want to put stuff in my slots. I still want this to be select, sorry. Well, when you add the section, you can see that each one of these slots is actually set up as a block space. So anything that you would normally put into one of those region blocks on Layout Builder can be dropped into here. So that means any of your blocks, anything that would appear in this little sidebar column over here, including but not limited to layout components. So you could put a party card in a party card. I won't do that, but it's possible. Instead, I'll just do a quick basic block. Party card title, add a block, and then we can save here. And up at the top of the blog post now, we should get, on our new and improved layout, a party card title. Yay! So, Layout Builder, fields, field formatters, blocks. The last one is views. And views I love especially for cards. I'll go to my next slide actually. Views I love especially for cards because it's you can just do a wrapper of grid and then you get a nice long card display. So let's check that out. Structure, views, and we'll just make a new one. New name, new recipes, content to pipe recipes, make a page, new recipes, formatted as fields, and we'll use a pager save and edit. Fastest view we've ever made. So we've just got a list here of the titles of all of our recipes that are on the site as provided by the Umami demo. So we're going to focus on is this format section up here. You could do the whole view as a component. So if you wanted the whole view as a component, you could set that up to your party card, as you do. And then in the body or headline or any slot, you can add the view rows. And you can even go so far, if you're using fields, as to filter down into which fields you want to render, or which field you want to render. But saving this properly with my dancing emoji, need to quit doing that. Shows that you get the whole content of the view down here in your preview. And that's one lovely thing I actually like about components and UI patterns a lot, is when you go to do this in a view, it renders the whole thing, because all the CSS and JavaScript and everything comes part and parcel. So all your JS is active and everything's working. And then you get even more granular. I'll take this and put this in a grid, a 4 wide one. And then down here, instead of field view, you do a component view. Hooray! And in this case, we'll pick party card again. And I'll do the dark party variant, because we haven't had that very much. We'll add the headline, add the source, and down in the source here, not only do you have access to the view fields, and are able to select the field as you did before in the overall wrapper version, but you can also, because of the way this is set up, access actual entity content. That could be a blessing and a curse depending on how you approach it. It could let you sort of circumvent using views to pull content, but a lot of people like to use views fields to modify content, add fields together, make them inline, that sort of thing. So this offers you a ton of flexibility as far as how you'd actually render this stuff. And now you can see that down here, each and every one of these has its own card. Hooray! All right. So looking toward the future, we're seeing constant updates and improvements in the module ecosystem of UI Suite. Every day there's something new coming down the pipeline. You're also going to see more core implementation. A lot of the themes you know and love already have this stuff implemented. Even Bootstrap Ario, which is kind of outdated and superseded by UI Suite Bootstrap, also has some of these components set up already. You're also going to see it in field implementation. I discussed that a little bit, where they're talking about on the back end of the site, making it so that you could use components for fields and their specific pieces. One thing that's kind of big that's coming out just recently, within this past 2 or 3 weeks, is Display Builder. That just went alpha. It seeks to replace core building components like Layout Builder, like the Blocks UI, even the Views displays. It's I don't want to say drag and drop, because I've not actually tried to drag and drop anything on it yet, but it is sort of a content builder in the same way that Experience Builder is, if you've seen demos for Experience Builder. There's distinct demos for Display Builder on its project page. I would check that out before anything else, honestly. The key differences are, well, the idea is that it's all built on the AI Suite APIs. It's all stock Drupal stuff that already exists on the site. And it's, in that way, not the same as Experience Builder. Experience Builder is kind of layering on a whole JavaScript React layer to make a content builder, whereas Display Builder is just sort of doing it with all the APIs and components and all that stuff that already exists. To that end, I believe, and don't quote me on this because it's still very alpha, Display Builder doesn't require like the additional properties that you have to have on components to make them work. But there are still some schema properties you could add to it to make it do a more appropriate field. Like if you had a select box, but it needed to be a multi-select or something like that. I think you could, and that actually extends to UI patterns as well. Sometimes you don't want just a select. Sometimes you want to be able to do like a tagging sort of thing even. But Experience Builder is more focused though on the content specific experience. So when you go to edit a piece of content, instead of like going into Layout Builder and making content changes there, you would use Experience Builder. Whereas Display Builder is focused on doing a single format of display modification across the whole site. So not just content, but also Layout Builder, also your block setup, and your views and all that stuff. It's still very early days. It's an interesting, if not exciting, technology in that it's directly competing in some ways to something that Dries has pimped on stage. So we'll see how that turns out. But stay tuned on Slack because that's really going to be where all the action is and the discussion. And that's it. Thanks for coming. I went through this much faster than I thought I was going to, probably because I had interruptions while I was doing it the first time. But I do have space for questions, about 9 or 10 minutes if anybody's got any questions.
So, are you going to be able to use display builder with experience builder?
I believe so. The way they have it set up right now is I think that you'll, and the problem is I've not jumped in with Experience Builder or Display Builder since it's so new, but I think it's kind of like Layout Builder where if you want to use it, you turn it on and then just can use it for that piece of content.
Use it for structural.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And the SDC would be written the same for either one.
Just about, because there are, if you were in Mike's class, there are properties and schemas that make properties lend themselves to different types of input fields, like I was saying, and those can break your components in certain places. And I would not be surprised if they broke them in UI patterns or Display Builder. So, all right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I hope this was useful and entertaining.